Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber, joined here by Janine Atamian. We're going to break down the biggest live trials and legal stories in the news today. We have a lot to cover. We're going to be live in multiple courtrooms, so you're joining us at a great time. Let's break it all down. There you have it. Not only was he found guilty, but as you just heard, 15 years in prison. That is no short sentence right there. Are you surprised by 15 years? I mean, that was the maximum. And I would imagine that if for a man who ended up being found guilty of murdering his father, but the jury said he was found not guilty of doing that, but they did find him guilty of dismembering that corpse. Are you surprised by 15 years?
I was not surprised by 15 years because you can see the disgust on the judge's face. I think the prosecution, who was, saying maybe 24 months probation, 21 months in jail, the defense, they're probably surprised.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'm also here with trial attorney Kelly Hyman, who's joining us via Skype. Now, Kelly, good to see you. I want your reaction to this. I mean, 15 years, some of us were saying, well, there's no way he's going to get the maximum. This is a guy who really didn't have that kind of criminal history that you would see maybe in other kinds of cases. And especially, again, when the jury said he didn't kill his father. Okay, so let me ask you this, that, his attorneys had asked for a pretty light sentence considering what it is. They asked 2 years in a drug offender probation and inpatient treatment facility. The chances of them getting that were pretty low, I would imagine. The question is, he came forward and admitted to what he did on the stand. Shouldn't that have been accounted for in some way in the sentencing?
So I think that he did take that into consideration, but if you hear the judge, he says up until that point there was no remorse. He sent police on a wild goose chase. He said that he had been kayaking. He had a lot of opportunities to do the right thing that he did not take.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And Kelly, let me ask you this. Is there any way that he could get out earlier than 15 years?
Well, he could get out for good behavior. I mean, he could also try and appeal that decision as well. But, ultimately we'll have to see what happens in regards to that.
Yeah, it's such a disturbing case, and anytime we mention what it's about, I sometimes can't believe what I'm actually saying. But what I'm about to say is the truth. There are parts of his father's body that are still missing. And one of the things that his family, the family members were saying, why were these not discovered? What would they reveal about the manner of death? What do you think about that?
Well, I think his family, they had a prior homicide with the brother, and I think that they really believe that he killed his father. They don't buy this story that it was an overdose from the cocaine. And so, his head is missing. That's right. Really kind of disturbing.
Yeah, that's a sentence that I can't even believe we just said. Kelly, what's your take on this? Is this a guy who really, it's remarkable that the jury found him not guilty of the murder? Because really, him testifying, and I'll say it once, I'll say it again, I think him testifying is really what saved his whole life here. And the fact that it was such an outrageous story, it had to be true. Or the jury said it has to be true. How could someone make this up?
Absolutely. That's a really good point. And whether he actually had the intent himself to kill his father. And ultimately, the jury decided that he didn't have that intent to harm his father. But based on the fact that, he said that he cut up his body and did that. And as she stated, the head was missing. And that's such a horrific thing to do to something that you love. It. He allegedly had such this great relationship with his own father. To do that to his own father is just heartbreaking. Yeah,
and the judge said, look, you showed no remorse. But what was interesting, when he testified, and he didn't speak really during the sentencing, but when he testified at trial, there were moments that he took these dramatic pauses, that emotions swelled up. Talking about the decision to chop up his father's body, I thought that might have been taken into consideration by the judge as well, but clearly not.
Well, but again, was that true remorse, or was that, as Kelly said, his last attempt to save his life?
Right.
And to convince him that this is all he did and he would have done it differently. But again, the judge says up until that point, nothing.
Yeah, I guess the question is, Kelly, where do we go from cases like this? Obviously you want to set a straight standard for people to go, that you can't dispose of evidence, you can't dispose of bodies, and even if you admit to it, that's not going to save your life. What should we be taking away from the James Scandirito Jr. trial?
I think we should take away the fact that he tried to cover up what he did. I think the judge kind of made a point that if he would have come forward in the beginning and kind of set the record straight, But as you pointed out, sending these text messages, oh, his father was kayaking, that he had this deliberate intent and he knew exactly what he was doing. And I think that from that standpoint, it's important to think about that. If you're, that you shouldn't do that. You should come clean right away, or otherwise you're going to have to face the consequences of it. And he actually is going to. 15 years.
Oh, yes, he is. That is no joke. 15 years is a long time in prison. We have more to talk about what happened Friday in this case, and we're going to also wait to go live and talk about our new trials here on the network. So a lot to cover here today. Thanks for joining us. We'll be right back. I guess the question is, would there have been a situation where a man chops up the body of his father, and it's not the most heinous or egregious kind of situation where he deserves 15 years? If he wasn't trying to do it to escape authorities, I mean, if it wasn't an unsophisticated, if it was an unsophisticated kind of way of chopping up a body, you tell me, I don't know.
I don't think that there are any circumstances where you hear about somebody chopping up a body that aren't going to rise to the level of heinous like that. He could have dumped him in the ocean. He could have buried him in a shallow grave. This is just, and it conjures up the vision for everybody. It's awful.
So then I guess, Kelly, why not be there a maximum? 15 years in prison, an automatic 15 years, you do this, that's it. Why even have a range? How do you find a range of chopping up a body? Are there circumstances, again, where it seems less severe than other times? I don't know. I've never even thought I would be asking this question.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And Jessica, I think that the fact that there was a really strong argument that he had no remorse for what he did. And I think that resonated with the judge so much that it was so planned out that, he basically tried to hide this. And in fact, that allegedly he, was not truthful on the stand, and that the fact that he really did not show remorse, I think, weighed heavily on the judge to give him the max.
Yeah, and maybe it's also something along the lines of the degree in which the body was chopped up. Maybe you could have a dismember if you chop up a finger or hand. You know what? Just ignore me right now, because I'm getting into the weeds. Let's go to the defense's argument in front of the judge. And remember, the penalty that they asked for was pretty light. So let's hear what they had to say. So I'm curious your argument, what you think of their argument there, considering they asked for either 24 months in a probation program or a very limited amount of time in prison, almost 2 years. They asked for, again, sentenced to 15 years in prison. They were asking for a very light sentence. What do you make of their argument?
So she's basically asking the judge to give him the opportunity to become rehabilitated and to become a productive member of society. But at the same hand, she's saying he can't use his law license, he can't use his real estate license, and she's trying to drum up sympathy for him, but it didn't resonate with me at all.
Kelly, what about you? Did it resonate with you at all, hearing the other side of what is a heinous crime, trying to make sense of it, and you hear his defense attorneys? Your thoughts?
Right. I think she was trying to show that there was some mitigating circumstances for him to think about the what's going to happen to him if, in fact, that the judge made a determination to give him 15 years in prison. That he has also been harmed by the fact that he's, lost his father, that he's losing his law license. He's also would not be able to get his real estate license. And so that there should be other opportunity for him to develop himself and go through a program and help him become a member of society. But ultimately, the judge didn't think that that was the right punishment and made a determination that 15 years in jail would be the punishment for his crime that he committed. 15
years in prison, somebody who commits this crime, how do they fare well in prison compared to other kinds of individuals? I mean, again, he was found not guilty of murder, but he's going in there for a dismemberment of a human corpse. How do people like that, who are convicted of such crimes, how do they fare in prison?
So again, he might be a candidate that would not be put into general population, because you've got inmates who would do anything to see their father, who would do anything to see their mother, and here you are, you've done this to your father. So he may not go into general population.
And Kelly, I guess the other side of it is the family has been torn up about all of this, very happy to see this. What do you think the effect of Friday had on them?
It felt like some kind of justice for them. The fact that you're losing their father and that he died, that they seemed that there was some kind of relief, that ultimately there was a determination, and hopefully that they can, put this behind them. But you never, get over someone. You just learn to adjust to life without them.
Right. And I guess the thing was hearing in detail what he did, and when he took the stand and explained it, That was a remarkable day for everybody to hear, and everybody was waiting for James Scandirito to explain how on earth did this actually happen. What did you think of his testimony? Because we're going to have an opportunity to play it on the next, right after our next break.
So again, he's not a very compelling witness to me. And the other thing, watching that family hold hands and shake hands and that sense of relief, they know him outside of this courtroom. They didn't believe him from the very beginning. So and I think that that's important to know.
You didn't believe anything that he was saying on the stand about how it actually happened, or do you think the part where he talks about that finding his father dead is the part that you don't believe? Do you believe this is how he actually chopped up the body?
No, I believe that's how he chopped up the body, but again, he's saying, I made bad decisions, I went the wrong way. This is a really, really bad decision. It says a lot about your character for you to be able to do something like this.
Yeah, I wonder what kind of person would actually decide to do this. And really, I think the most important thing, Kelly, was the first part of his testimony, and we're going to get to it in a little bit, is how did he find his father? Did he kill his father, or did he find his father? And is that whole question that really determined what the rest of the case was going to be about, because he was conceding the fact that he dismembered his father's body. That part was clear. It's just, did he murder him or not?
Absolutely. But we have to go back to the fact that the jury ultimately determined that he was not guilty of, killing his father. That in fact that they actually, believed him that he didn't do it. But the fact that, he did chop up his own father, and that's really sad to hear someone would do something like that.
It is, and we're going to have an opportunity to hear from the man himself, because when he testified, everybody was listening. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Wow. Okay, so here's the other way of looking at it. Yes, the jury found him not guilty of murder. There are obviously people out there who still believe that he killed his father. The flip side of this, though, if he really intended to kill his father, wouldn't he have had all the materials necessary at his disposal to dismember the body and get rid of it, instead of going out and creating this sloppy trail of where he went?
Absolutely. You do make a very valid point about that. So I didn't necessarily think he killed his father, but again, what he did after his father died is just too much for me. So.
Yeah, well, it was too much for everybody. It was too much for the jury, and it was now too much for the judge after sentencing him to 15 years. Kelly, let me ask you this. The prosecution said that this guy had a motive to kill his father, that he was the beneficiary, the sole beneficiary of his father's accounts, and that the approximate worth of it was $800,000. That's a lot of money. Your thoughts on that, the motive?
No, absolutely. They're always looking at, why did someone do something? What was in their state of mind, and why would they want to kill them? And money is a good motive, to kill someone, especially if someone's having, some kind of financial problem or some kind of financial issue as well. She was made a good point, the fact that he didn't have all this stuff with him. So in fact, if he really was planning to kill his father, why didn't he have all this stuff, already there, and rather than going out to the store and having to get all this stuff?
Yeah, no, that's something that I was thinking about. But let's continue on with the defendant, talking more about what he did. All right, so let me ask you this. The jury obviously believed him, right? What about his testimony do you think made him so credible?
I think it's such an unbelievable story that he's telling that in and of itself makes it believable. Additionally, like you said earlier, he didn't have any of the materials to commit the murder, so why would he be so sloppy?
Kelly, is it also something that he gave a kind of reluctance that this is the last thing that he wanted to do? I mean, his theory, his rationale for doing this is that he didn't want to call police because they would see a dead body, they would blame him for the drugs. It never looks good when you have a dead body and drugs all over the place, and he did what he thought he had to do. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. And, the fact that the drugs were possibly affecting him, where he wasn't, thinking correctly, rationally of what to do. But then the fact that also that, he continued to hide the fact that his father was, out kayaking and missing. And then also the fact, it's interesting that what he said was, I went to the golf course because I knew, basically that it wasn't used. In fact, that no one was going to find the bodies. So if you think about that, the fact that his intent was he wanted to make sure that his father's body was never found.
Yeah, that's the way you put it. There's really no other way to put it. And that man you see right there, 15 years in prison, that's his fate. We'll maybe have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about James Scandirito Jr. a little bit later, but when we come back, we're going to focus on our new trials here on the Law and Crime Network. We'll be back.